Hello and welcome to Infotec. Daniel, Andrea, if you can share your audio and video, make sure everything's working for your session.
Hello, Monica.
Hello, hello.
How are you today?
I'm doing good. Happy birthday.
We're having fun. We are ready for this.
Okay, so yeah, I do see your, let's see, YouTube videos shared during the session. Okay, so let's see. Are you sharing a video or you have a presentation?
Nope, we're going to keep it simple.
Okay. I like it.
We are not able to see comments. Is there going to be somebody on your end who can respond to comments or read them out loud to us?
Yes, Maria will be here, and I will try to go in and out as well. So if there's any questions or comments, we'll be able to let you know.
Awesome.
And I can hear you and see you, so you guys are good to go, and you can start at 10 o'clock.
Cool. Andrea, why don't you talk and just check, sound check.
Oh, yep. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Great.
Love it.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Hello. Sorry, I just wanted to jump on real quick. So I'm happy and moderate the comment section. Would you like me to join on near the end, like the last 5 to 10, about any questions that may have been brought up during the time?
That would be excellent. Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
In the meantime, I will disappear, but I will be here in the background the entire time.
Okay.
All right. Good to see it.
Thank you so much, Maria.
Yeah, of course.
Maria, the other thing, and I'm sure you can hear us, but I don't know if we can hear you back, is if there are comments or questions that come in during the presentation that seem really timely, feel free to bring those to our attention.
I can hear you, yes. So I will do what I just did right now, where I will just feel free to keep finishing your thought or keep presenting. And then when a natural pause comes, that's when I can raise the question.
Okay.
Great.
Is there a way for us to see the comments? Because we're totally adaptable, but sometimes it's nice to ask just a question and let people type their response and see them.
Yeah, so I guess the question would be kind of how you're set up right now.
We're in
So
full screen mode right now so that we can see the video more clearly.
Okay, so the only way to see the comment section would be to open up another screen. So if you would be able to put like a laptop in between the two of you, that might be an option. I know we're 5 minutes before, so it's a bit tight. Otherwise, if you did exit full screen mode, I can confirm to you that your video quality is coming through really well.
Okay.
And we are able to see the writings that you have as well. So if that was a concern, I know you are set to go now, so you may feel more comfortable in removing that full screen function and being able to see the comments too.
Okay. I'll see if I can get logged on here on my iPad, and then maybe we could have the comment stream.
Okay. Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you for being so adaptable. I know every virtual presentation is a little different.
Yeah, well, thank you for your support. Appreciate it, Maria.
Of course. All right, I'll jump back off.
Go time in 4 minutes. We might get a little feedback for just a moment. It's not going to work. Is that view okay, or is that distracting to have deal with just the black background?
Just the black would probably be better.
All right, we'll just go with that. So we are not going to be able to see comments. We're going to go with the full screen mode. And I wasn't able to get the tablet set up in time. So that's all good. We got that. And then I'm guessing that maybe we give them a minute or two. I don't know if there's another session ending right before this one, before people start hopping on.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome everyone, it's 10 o'clock. We are gonna wait another minute or so before we fully launch in to give folks a chance to get through all the technical difficulties of logging on sometimes or switching between sessions. So we'll start in a minute or two. All right, let's get started. So welcome to Life as a Beta Test, the practice of resilience. I'm Daniel Lawse with Verdis Group, a small sustainability consulting firm based here in Omaha. working with zoos, aquariums, universities, healthcare institutions, airports across the country with their sustainability and climate action planning and implementation.
And I'm Andrea Lawse. I'm the founder of Artemis Tea and Botanical. Artemis is a company that's based on reconnecting people and plants. That's really the primary mission that runs through everything that we do. We just opened up a new shop in Blackstone. So if you're interested, you can check out more about us there.
And we are today, so husband and wife, if you didn't know that, 2 small business owners, and we today are going to share a couple things that we think will be helpful for you. We're going to share a framework called the adaptive cycle that can help you more gracefully move through life in the midst of continuous changes, one of the core practices of resilience. And then we're going to sprinkle in different tools and ideas and things you can take away from a mindfulness perspective, because that's part of the story here. Is we're sitting in a Zendo that I designed and built over the pandemic because I got bored and needed something to do, and a lot more story to that. And also some critical shifts in thinking that will help you become more resilient in your own life. So first, I want to start with defining resilience. And I don't do a lot of handwriting charts, so bear with me. We're trying the old school way, being in the Zendo. So resilience is the capacity to recover from shocks and thrive in the midst of a continually changing environment. And so kind of the simple version or simple definition of resilience is the ability to bounce back. We can get better at resilience. We can build that capacity. We can strengthen it. We can work out our resilience muscle. And this whole idea is that we live in a world where change is the only constant thing in life. So we're all practicing micro levels of resilience. And then sometimes there's big shocks or big disruptions to our system that we have to practice more of a big resilience. We have to have that strength to be able to bounce back and continue to thrive in the midst of all this change. So one of the core principles of resilience is, what are you bouncing back to? It's so important that you know your own center, that you know your purpose and your mission. And if you don't have clarity around that today, it's okay. But when you do know where you're headed, whether it's the company mission of connecting people to plants, or at Verdis Group where we're co-creating a world where everybody can thrive and be resilient, that gives us a direction so that when big system shocks come our way, we're able to recenter ourselves. So part of the practice of resilience is knowing your center, getting familiar with it, getting clear on your mission. And then that is kind of a guiding star to bring you back. And we said life as a beta test. So beta test is you're probably all familiar with this, but the reason I call my life a beta test is because it's real life, it's real users, my wife, my kids, my colleagues, everything around me is giving me feedback, and I'm constantly working out bugs that are in my system, in my life, and the way I do things. So life as a beta test is this mental shift to this idea that the world is always changing and that I always need to be growing. And, is any tech product ever really finished? There's always updates and things. So I kind of think about that as my life. So next I want to share the adaptive cycle, because this is the framework that you'll be able to apply to your life no matter what changes are happening. And we're going to use this as we hear about Andrea's story and some of the sprinkling in of the Zendo for me. So it's an infinity symbol. It represents everything is constantly moving. And when we recognize and accept that everything is constantly moving, life is a lot better than if we try to hold on tightly to things and pretend they don't move. But let me just write out these 4 stages of the adaptive cycle. This first one is called release. And release comes from some sort of disruption or shock. And it's easy for all of us to relate to the pandemic. We've been living through it. The mask mandate in Omaha was just lifted as of Tuesday. So we're going to use that as a backdrop, and you can perhaps reflect on your life over the last year and how this cycle may apply. But this cycle can take place over the course of a year, and it can happen multiple times in one day. So there are things that release. This release stage is something where we can intentionally release something. I'm going to let go of a bad habit. I'm going to change jobs, change relationships. And sometimes the release is forced upon us, an external variable that comes in and says, guess what? There's a pandemic. You need to change everything. Once we release things, and there's a good analogy here with like an ecosystem, that's really where this comes from, like a forest, right? You've got a forest and then there's a forest fire. it releases a lot of energy. So this interesting thing, there's a lot of sadness, anger, emotion in this release quadrant because we're humans and it's hard to let things go. But when we step back and view it at a little bit bigger picture, we recognize that there's a lot of energy that's being released as well. In a forest, there's a lot that goes back into the soil to replenish and grow new things. So this next quadrant here is explore. What are the new ideas, the new things, the seeds that are being scattered that you're exploring? And so after you release, you can get into explore, and these seeds begin, not all seeds actually turn into a plant. A lot of them don't, the conditions aren't right. But some of them round this corner and they begin to launch, they begin to take root. This is when, as if you're an entrepreneur, up here is all the ideation, and it's possible to get stuck here, get stuck in analysis paralysis or just ideate but never actually implement. Launch is like, let's go execute, let's start this thing and let's launch some pilot tests. What's taking root, replicate what works, and as you learn what's working, you begin to come up into this quadrant, which is sustain. And from that forest analogy, this is the mature forest. So these are the seeds being scattered. These are the seedlings launching. Not everything that's launched makes it into a sustain quadrant, but some things do. And then you get this kind of new normal kind of status quo, but there's still, micro letting goes in that. So I guess what I want to do is let this be a framework for you all to think through and hear how Andrea has handled as a small business owner through the pandemic some of this stuff. So one of the questions to think about for release that you can ask yourself is, what did you let go of? What was released?
Yeah, so for Artemis, last March when the pandemic came on, it was just a windfall of opportunities to release. We experienced a holistic shedding and restructuring really of the basis of what I had been doing for the last 3 years. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, our wholesale accounts just dropped off, like 90%. 90% of our wholesale accounts disappeared overnight or just paused. And so, we weren't at a growth phase that posed an insurmountable obstacle. But nonetheless, it required an immediate response to that situation. The next thing that began happening immediately was instability of the team. So, I've just been in the process of hiring new folks on before the pandemic happened and just finished training. The pandemic comes along and, within a couple of weeks, then there was that new strain for the employees thinking, I can make more going home and being on unemployment than I can working. So we had to work through that entire situation again to figuring out how to plug all of those different pieces. It required me to work more in isolation, and the team that we did have on had to separate, and so we had to work at different times of the day. So that was definitely a challenge to our communication and to our team building and all of those really core pieces to running a smooth operation. And then the last thing, one of the last things that came up during the pandemic as well was the space that we had been in. We had known that we had outgrown it. We were like totally overgrown in the space, but because of COVID, like maybe we can hang on, suffer this out a little bit because everything's so unstable. But it did so happen that where we were at, we were down at Hardy Coffee Company, and Hardy was in the process of growing, and they really needed that space back, and we didn't want to disrupt that for them. So we were also forced to look for a new operations site. So that kind of triggered really everything we're going to be talking about next in that next phase or place with Explore.
So in this phase of release, maybe you can all think back to some of the things that you've been releasing or had to release at the beginning of the pandemic, throughout the pandemic. And then Andrea, I just want to check in, what were some of the emotions? Because when there's a lot of release, a lot of the things that you were talking about happened to you. They were releases that you didn't say, hey, I'm going to intentionally do this. What kind of emotions, if you could name a few?
Yeah. Whenever you're forced to, overnight make those sorts of decisions, it was, yes, despair and sadness and overwhelm, and definitely a temptation to translate all of that as stress. And underneath all of it was an abiding hope and a faith that, that there were core pieces that were still foundationally in place, and that there were no signs saying, everything's going to fall apart. But there were a lot of challenges that were being presented all at once. And so I really did have to step back and figure out how to contextualize that and how to look at that so that I didn't submit to that temptation to just spiral down into stress and anxiety and despair.
Oh, and we had our fair share of that. So that's one of the tools from a mindfulness perspective, and this practice of resilience is bouncing back, right? And so when we're in any one of these stages, I don't know about you, but I wake up each morning and I'm like, oh, it's today, and I've got this list of things to do. It's easy to just view a very small section of the cycle that we're in. And from this perspective, it looks like it's a straight line and that it's going to last basically forever. So you also mentioned being able to zoom out and recognize that this too shall pass. Even the explore, every single one of these phases will pass. Even sustain, people are like, well, we want to get to a sustaining place as a business or as a relationship or as a community. But that's not always going to be the case. There's always going to be micro disruptions and shocks to that system that you have to be resilient to. So it's important, one of the skills to practice here, and if you're taking notes, kind of one of the practices of resilience is shifting your worldview from short term to long term, because it gives you more context. It helps you see the bigger picture, and it helps you not get so stuck in some of the big emotions that can come, especially in this phase of release. So as we round this corner of release, one of the things kind of with this forest analogy is like, there's a lot of energy and resources that are literally released. There was a lot of energy and resources released. Like, so you were paying somebody for on your team, but they're not there anymore. Now you have money to pay somebody else on your team. So there's also this opportunity piece. And I'll weave in here the story of this Zendo. So last year, meditation and mindfulness is important to me. I've wanted to have a backyard Zendo for 20 years or more, and just have never had the time, energy, or money to do it. And we had this concrete pad with this old shed on it. And I was able to sell the old shed. So I released those resources built up in that. I had some money to invest in building this space. And then I was able to start to construct and build and explore the ideas and then launch. And the purpose of this space is really this grounding and centering place. Going back to one of the core tenets of resilience is knowing what you're bouncing back to. So almost like a through line for this, I won't draw it on here because it might confuse us, but a through line through all of this is, what's your purpose? What's your mission? Connect people to plants. You stayed true to that, and then that allowed you to explore ideas. And for me, it's about, I want to make sure that I've got a system and structure in place in my life to help me return to center, because I get thrown off all the time. And that's the practice of resilience. So as we go up this loop here and move into the explore phase, one of the questions we can ask ourselves are, what resources are still there? What resources made it through? What resources were released that we now have access to explore? And really this exploration phase, if I were to sum it up, it's looking for patterns and possibilities. So in those moments when you weren't in despair and, getting stuck, because I know we did, when you had that hope and that bigger perspective, what patterns and possibilities did you start to notice, Andrea?
Well, I think taking stock of, what are our roots? What's the foundation? What always persists and can never be taken away? Well, first and foremost, that's my creativity. At any given time, how many blends Artemis Tea is currently offering. I could shrink the amount of blends. I could create new blends. I can show up more to do more of the processing of the teas. I myself can give more labor. We have family members that can give. There was a lot of familial support and a lot of support from friends and from neighbors. So I knew that I was not doing this all by myself. I knew that a lot of people were invested in me, and they were invested in the company and the vision and the mission of what Artemis is. And that, honestly, in truth, was overwhelming to see, how many people near me who knew that these struggles were happening wanted to help. So taking stock of those resources, first and foremost, was huge. Then, of course, COVID, monetary support, PPP. There were other opportunities that were showing themselves. They were small, but they were really important and truly catalysts. Giving me more opportunities to think through, what's next. And I didn't feel shy about setting ambitious goals, even though everything looked really tough. I really believe in my mission, and I really believe in what I'm doing, and just having that feedback loop of community support was really instrumental in helping me feel that much more confident, saying, no, I can have these ambitious goals. It's just about figuring out what steps need to be taken in order to help me implement those. One of the things I did was really take a step back after, shedding a lot of my current team. I got to step back and I got to take stock and think about, who do I really want to have on this team to work with me? What are the key areas that we need to develop, and how do I really start calling those folks to us? The other thing that I had to begin doing is asking the really big questions of, well, if we're not going to be in this old space, where is that new space going to be? And what's it going to look like? And what sort of interface is it going to have with the community? Will this be a space where it's just straight operations, where we just produce? Will this be a place that has operations, but we also have an opportunity to have retail and interface with the community that way? It took months really of looking around at all kinds of different spaces, all kinds of different arrangements, and finally landing on something, and then really sticking to our guns and trying to negotiate something that we felt could work. And the other opportunity there was in having shed all of the wholesale. Obviously, the next thing was thinking, okay, we've got to pivot really quickly here, and in order to make up that deficit, I turned immediately to the web and direct to consumer sales. This was something that I'd already had planned to do and was slowly beginning to do before COVID hit, but that became absolute number one priority. So immediately got on the phone, started working with the folks that helped me with our online platform, and our website had really great bones. It was a really great website. It was functioning well, but there were definitely things that needed to happen in order for it to be more impactful and to have better SEO capability. So I put all of my creative energy there at first. I apologize. Apologize for that. Then social media became a brand new, first and foremost thing in my day. So where social media tended to be kind of something that I was able to get to maybe a couple of times a week. Typically it wasn't necessary for our stability. It became a very important functional tool. I was working with social media every single day, trying to really up our engagement with the community, both locally and nationally. Anybody who would be interested in what we were doing.
And one of the things that I really appreciated about the web redesign and the social media is that you took it back to your mission about connecting people to plants.
Yes.
And so even though you're a tea company, and I can talk because I've seen the evolution of this from the outside, like she never really intended to start a tea company. It came from this deep purpose and driven sense of connecting people to plants because of the richness that brings to fulfilling their own lives and the community. And then it became, tea is a vehicle for that. And so when she redid your website, plant forward, plant focused, and tea was there obviously, but it was about connecting you to the plants with these very beautiful images, with these words that just draw you in. And that's how you led to on social media. It wasn't like, quick, buy tea because we're a small business and we're suffering and our revenues fell out of the bottom. It was, okay, even though that's probably where you wanted to go sometimes, like in freak out mode, gotta buy tea, gotta sell tea. It was, No, this is really about connecting people to plants. So let's stay true to that mission that's this through line through all of these sections. If you're exploring and you're not connecting to your mission, you can go in, if you imagine a circle and the center point of a circle, if you don't know what direction you want to go, you could accidentally head in that direction, but you have 365 degrees of other directions, or 360 degrees of other directions that you could accidentally end up in. So it's core to knowing what your mission and purpose is, either that individually or at the company that you're with when you're working with these things, to be able to explore in a way that isn't sending you in too many various directions that are completely the wrong way.
Thank you. I'm trying to decide whether to talk about, the relationships and how my relationships with plants were sustaining to me during this process, which just further reiterated why I felt it was so important to emphasize how other people's relationship with plants could sustain them. So I just have this, little reminder here. I pulled some plants from my garden the other day that I keep, this is called mugwort. It's an Artemisia, and this is the plant that is associated with the goddess Artemis, the name and the archetype from which I built this company, this brand around really everything that Artemis embodies. But I keep this in my garden as a constant reminder, both as an herb that we utilize in the teas that we use, and also visually as that grounding reminder of why I'm here and why I'm doing what I'm doing every day. Artemis and Artemisia, it's like a friend to me. And I really, it really gives me peace and comfort, growing these plants and interacting with them every day, and ingesting them. And so again, stepping back and thinking about the opportunities that release is offering me, and how it gives me a point of clarity, a crystal clear clarity about why I'm doing this, because it's hard. And if there's not a real reason to drive forward through all of this, then why would I? But again, this always would bring me back to my center, and I wanted to be able to share that in a much more concentrated form with others. So again, that change for our website and really putting the plants forward was one of the ways that I tried to implement that.
And that really brings up a great point of what is it that brings you back to your center? Because at every stage of this cycle that you're going to be at throughout your day, throughout your life, how do you return to your center when you get thrown off? Because principle number one, we live in a continuously changing environment. So how do we deal with that change? And for Andrea, one of the things that centers her is her plants, and her garden is a cup of tea. For you, it might be working out. It might be a cup of tea. It might be meditation. It's meditation for me. And this idea of, this is one of those mindfulness tools and perspectives that is a good principle for practicing resilience. Life is full of change. I'm going to get thrown off often and sometimes wildly. And the question is, how often, how quickly do I notice I get thrown off, and how quickly I return? And there's this great story of an Aikido master in Japan. Imagine a shorter Japanese man who's in his dojo and in his martial arts uniform, and his students are all around him like, Master, how come you never get thrown off? We never see you get stressed out. We never see you get upset. And he just looks at him and he smiles and he says, I get thrown off all the time. I just return very quickly. So with practice, we can actually notice when we get thrown off and return back to our center quickly. And the question to ask yourself is, what are the systems, the structures, and the relationships in your life that help you get back to your center, to recenter when you get thrown off? It might be friends or family, it could be children, it could be parents, it could be an athletic practice or a musical practice or some craft or creative endeavor that you partake in. It could just be sitting quietly and enjoying a cup of coffee or a cup of tea or reading a book. But notice those things that allow you to manage your state. This is another term here, is state management. If I know that I'm getting thrown off, how do I manage my state and return back? So go for a walk, whatever that thing is when you know you're getting thrown off. So the awareness that you're thrown off, and then the ability to practice one of those things do take one of those actions that helps bring you back to being centered is so critical as a practice of resilience as you're moving through this cycle. And so then you can explore and explore and explore. And as I mentioned at the beginning, you can get stuck here. In fact, they call this the trap. There's a trap here and there's a trap there. This trap is a failure to invest. You're just ideating and never investing in anything. So the question becomes, what do you invest in and begin to launch? That nature analogy, the forest analogy is, which seeds landed in fertile soil and are starting to take root? What do you put more resources into? What do you invest your time, energy, and money into to say this is a good idea? This is the pilot phase of company products or ideas or innovations. And one other core principle before I asked Andrea to elaborate, she talked a lot about this shift from being separate to connected. Even from the release to the explore, she brought up community. It's the relationships. And a critical shift when you're practicing resilience is recognizing that we aren't separate. We might think we're separate. We might think it's all about me, or this is my world and my pod, but the fact is we're connected. And when we recognize that, we begin to see the abundance that surrounds us, even if in the moment we feel like we're all alone. So if you're feeling stuck and feeling alone, recognize you're not. There's a community around you. And it doesn't have to just be a human community. It can be your pets. It can be your plants. But our systems are connected. We live in a living system. So from separate to connected is one of those shifts down here. And these shifts are applicable in all these stages, but from short term to long term, extending your time horizon for how you think will also help you practice resilience. So Andrea, for you, as you went through this exploration phase, you talked about a lot of different things that you had to explore, from teams to space to website to ways to reach. Like, which things started to take root? Which things did you begin to invest more in, and enough to at least test them out? And maybe even some of those things you test out as a pilot also get released again, because they're not going to all make it to the sustain quadrant.
So as I had mentioned, the website was kind of the key focal piece, because everything was distant. And I just experimented with how to interact with our clientele and our customer base and our audience in that particular regard. So sending different sorts of informational emails, creating blogs and sharing those, or journal entries, just trying to really increase my communication with my audience as directly as I possibly could. And we did indeed see a wonderful, positive feedback loop from that. Other things that began taking root were, just in this, again, exploring new spaces and finally slowly honing in on the right space, and then beginning to figure out, okay, if this is our new home base, exactly how will we be taking root here? How will we set up operations to run smoothly and successfully? How will we utilize this space also to be a small interactive space with our community? So those were the pieces that I really focused on intently. Can you think of others that were fundamental?
Yeah, as you were launching and trying new things, you did a lot of experimentation online and trying to understand what did people resonate with. And you found this is kind of a cool feedback loop, that people resonated with the fact that you were connecting them to plants. You weren't out there trying to sell tea. You were trying to connect people to plants. And your images on Instagram and Facebook were about a lot of relationships with plants and very plant focused. I remember you talking about drink plants or fight plant blindness.
Yeah. So I mean, another key piece here is that, miraculously right when COVID was beginning, I met a business partner who I had just a wonderful connection with, and who, as we were talking through what are these fundamental pieces of Artemis, she fell in love with that as well, and she resonated with that in a very key way. And so I had another person who I was able to work with, and the key things that we identified were, how do we create right out of the gate systems that are sustainable, that are replicable. So systematizing the business as much as possible. So it was a great opportunity. We're starting off in a new space. We had already decided that we weren't going to go full on operations. We were also going to have retail, because it just felt really necessary to the Omaha community, really. And So in moving forward, we had those decisions made. So it became about systematizing. It began bringing on this new partner, and then really going out and finding the team members that we needed to help make this a success. Being very intentional about finding someone who is an outstanding operations person, another person who is outstanding at front of the house, and really engaging with customers when they walk in the door and helping them find their perfect team match. So this new team that we gathered, small but mighty, really expanded our skill set. It expanded our capabilities, and it created a sense of community again, that really helped that feeling of mutual thriving. So all in all, in launching, we were able to increase our capacity as a business, and we were able to increase our ability to specialize in other areas too.
And I mean, what you're talking about is kind of an evolution of an entrepreneur, right? You start a business with an idea and you start to play with things, you're exploring things, and then you start to say, okay, we're finding an idea that's working, so let's systematize it. Let's build in some of that root structure and healthy structure that helps make us be more efficient. The reason a grassland can turn into a forest, or that perennials outpace annuals, is because an annual flower has to grow from seed every single year, but a perennial has this deep root structure that's holding all this energy to be able to grow again when spring comes. And even if it takes longer for it to sprout out than an annual, which pops up, that perennial is longer lasting, and then it can turn into this mature ecosystem. And so I wanted to call out a couple key concepts here. You talked about feedback loops, the beta test idea. This is really a great analogy for the beta test, because it's let's pilot things, let's replicate what works. And in order to replicate what works and let go of the things that don't, because if you keep doing something that's not working, it's a waste of time and energy and money perhaps, you need feedback loops. You need to have feedback information loops built in, so you can know either from your customers or from, in a familial standpoint, your relationships with the people you care about or your friends, to say these sorts of things are working and let's replicate that. We all love praise and we all love positive feedback. And what do you all do when you get it? You do that thing more. So feedback loops are a critical resilience practice in the launch phase, but really in any of these phases. And then another one that's really key here is that mission piece, going back to the center. If you're launching something, make sure it's aligned with your mission. Otherwise, it's eventually going to fail, or you're going to have to change your mission. And one last fundamental thing here that before we move into the sustain phase is that it's a mindset shift, that we all have to recognize that we're a learning, that the world is an open system full of constant change, full of variables that we don't control. So we really have to hold ourselves from this kind of open hand position of healthy structure, but not too rigid. So if you're at home or wherever you are, go ahead and take your fist out and hold it in front of you and squeeze really, really tightly. Have you ever had an idea or a plan that you really wanted to just hold on to? Well, I invite you to now just take a breath and open lightly. Holding our fist tightly takes a lot of energy. It actually can hurt us if you have sharp nails. But if we hold lightly, it allows space to actually hold things in a healthy structure, but it gives that space for creativity and change in this continuously changing environment that we live in. And the opposite of the closed fist is just kind of like open fist, completely full, pushing away. Like, that's not where you want to be either. So finding that balance between when am I holding on to something tightly and when do I need to open my fist? Or maybe I'm just like shutting everything out and recognizing that posture too, and being like, okay, I do need to welcome and hold some things in my life. So those are some tools that you can apply to your life for this practice of resilience. And then as we round the curve of launching up to the sustain quadrant, it really becomes this question of what's worth continuing. So we are kind of towards the end of the pandemic, at least in the version and understanding that we have now, with mask mandates being lifted, vaccines at over 50% in Douglas County. So when you make a loop all the way around here and you get back to the sustain, you're never the same person. There are some things that continue through your core purpose, your mission, but there's the forest that burns down and goes through this loop still becomes a forest again, but it's different. The trees are different, the locations are different, the habitat. has different shade and sun patterns, and different animals are coming. And so recognizing that when we go through this journey, we'll get to a sustained phase and we'll be different. Something will change fundamentally inside of us. So the question to ask here of yourself is, what stuck around? What made it all the way through? What were the new ideas that launched that continued? And what are some of those things that even continued from before the pandemic that helped you go through this whole thing? So I'm curious, Andrea, for you, what are some of those things that are worth continuing as you explored, launched, and then started to sustain in a more mature ecosystem?
So, as I had mentioned, really falling back to that core mission and purpose of connecting people and plants. This is how I personally feel I'm going to make an impact in the world, how I can help people care about the natural world around them in a very intimate and personal way, in a way that makes them feel truly involved, just by caring about plants. And so really falling back to that, and falling back to creating the teas and talking about the teas, helping people experience those teas. And so when we opened our shop, for the first couple of months, we have 4 samples tea samples we brew up every single day. We invite people in, come have free samples. You just experience these plants. We have smelling jars. It's a very tactile environment. Plants around, the green, like everything is really about calming a person and inviting a person and piquing their curiosity and helping be matchmakers, basically. An herbalist is really a matchmaker, helping find the perfect plant for a person at a given time. And so that's one of the things that was re-emphasized and even more developed, and really continued to be a core piece. We set up these systems of organization. They're functioning really well, and that is something that it will continue to sustain us. So even if there are further disruptions in the future, we have laid really important groundwork that is going to help us stay stable through those hiccups. We have a wonderful, stable team. We have a wonderful, stable home environment. We have a home now that's all our own. It's really exciting, and we're really investing in that. And at this point, wholesale is very slowly starting to come back. So that's a wonderful plus and bonus. And the next phase is, now that we've got some roots going, now we can begin focusing on developing wholesale further. Another thing that's slowly coming back is, tea in offices. We love serving office buildings and being their partner and providing a tea service for all of the folks that are there. And that totally shut down during COVID, and it's starting to come back. And that's a really fun way of getting to another wonderful audience of folks who love to drink warm beverages and to have tea be a part of that, not just coffee. Those are some of the key things that I have been thinking about.
Yeah, and we're gonna end here in just a moment so we can open it up for questions. I hope you have some good questions for us about this adaptive cycle, or how do you apply it in your life? I'd love to hear if anybody wants to share if this resonated with them. What have you released? How did you explore? What did you launch? And now what's sticking around? Kind of one of the fundamental, I'm just going to recap the fundamental shifts that need to be made for practicing resilience in your own life. Number 1, shifting the mentality from things are separate to they're connected, right? It's moving from singular to diverse. Diversity leads to resilient systems. Diversity in experience, in people, in ideas. Shifting from self-interest to community interest is a critical shift if you want to practice resilience in your life. And that all comes from being able to see those interdependencies between people and organizations and communities. So from separate to connected. The second critical shift is shifting your thinking from short-term to long-term. When we're just zoomed in on one little part of our life or one little part of the cycle, it's really hard to practice resilience because we begin to hold really tightly to that one place where we are, and we don't think about what else is all around us. So shifting from short-term thinking to long-term thinking gives us perspective. It recognizes that an event here is connected to an event here is connected to an event here, instead of like oh my gosh, everything is falling apart and it's always going to be this way. And then this idea, a critical shift from an inert to a living system, that an inert system is like a machine or a computer, right? But a living system is a garden. And whether we like it or not, our businesses, our communities, our home life are all living systems. Any organization that has a human being in it is a living system. And so a living system works on reciprocity and relationships. When you look at ecosystems, there's always a generosity of each organism is giving more than it takes. And it's valuing every person, every organism in that system equally. It's not putting one above another in any way like that. And then so separate to connected, short-term to long-term, inert to living systems. And the fourth critical shift is from closed to open system. Shifting your thinking from, I can control everything, to actually I live in an open system where there's a lot of variables I can't control. Really kind of fundamentally, this is accepting that change is the only constant thing in life. And when you do, it's easy to be able to move through and practice resilience no matter what challenges you face, either in your personal life or in your business life.
There's just one last thing that I wanted to bring full circle, because we didn't really get to talk as much about the Zendo as what we had hoped to, but I talked in the beginning about how there's such a temptation to experience all of this as stress. It just is, we are very busy people. We have 3 children, 2 jobs, we have parents, we have family, all of this demands, all of us do, right? So in him having built this Zendo and him really having taken this space, our whole family made space for Daniel to create this beautiful structure. And really what it stands as is a symbol and a centerpiece of what our family needs in order to be able to step back, make some space and see this context for all of the things that we're experiencing on a daily basis, giving it a narrative, giving it meaning, and helping us make sense of it so we don't experience it just as overwhelm and as stress. So that has been, this magnificent gift that, this space is helping provide for us, in one way that we're trying to center ourselves and like I said, step back and be able to implement the lessons that this cycle teaches.
Yeah, thank you. Maria, do we have any questions or comments that anybody wants to share in chat? And as you're getting logged on, I will share that one of the shifts I made, I was teaching meditation every Thursday morning live at a yoga studio, Pranam Yoga Studio in Blackstone, and the pandemic forced me online. So every Thursday morning at 6:30, you're welcome to join me. I do a Zoom meditation. Send me a message via the event software, or find my email at verdisgroup.com, and I can send you the Zoom link. It's open to anybody. All experience is welcome. It's a 20-minute guided meditation every Thursday morning at 6:30 a.m. and we have people tuning in from all over the country on that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I may have to have you for the meditation, because that is definitely a skill worth practicing. But thank you. And also visually walking us through sort of what this looks like. I do not see any questions in that, but if you want to hang out for just a few more minutes, we can give people a chance to drop in any questions. Otherwise, is there anything else that you would like to add for us today?
I just want to say thank you to the organizers of Infotec for providing this opportunity for people in the tech community to learn and build skills, both the very hard skills of like how to run a better business or develop things better, to some of the softer skills that wrap around and create a higher quality of life, like the presentation, the self-optimization category of track of today's conference. So thanks everybody for joining.
Yeah, thank you everyone.
And we will hang out for a couple more minutes if you have any questions. I'll put a shameless plug in. If you like tea, stop in and Andrea will create a discount code for you.
Absolutely.
I don't know, Maria, if there's a way to share that with conference participants for either an online purchase or an in-store purchase.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. What I may have Keegan reach out to you over here in the next, just to gather that information from you, and that's something that we can include in our event wrap-up email for all the participants. So that would be great.
Thank you.
For sure. Well, I hope that this cycle, like Andrea said, can help give some perspective as we all suffer from shocks and disruptions. Like I said, I feel like I go through this cycle every day, multiple times a day on a small scale. And then also when I started going to this cycle in April, I was familiar with this before the pandemic, and we do sustainability consulting and resilience planning with our clients. I started sharing this framework with our clients, and it helped relieve so much stress. I mean, there was still a lot to do, but folks were able to step back and be like, okay, pandemic, disruption, major disruption, what are we releasing? But then, okay, how do we quickly explore? How do we innovate? How do we beta test? How do we get this next new thing? We were working with one client who had been talking for years about a work from home policy and never done it. And when the pandemic shut them down on Friday afternoon, they had a work from home policy Sunday night. So something that they couldn't launch in years and years of discussions, the pandemic launched them into creating a work from home policy in 3 days. So it's fun watching companies and people go through this cycle and know that these are the stages that can happen very quickly or even on a bigger scale.
Yeah, that is an excellent example. And I do have a question here in the chat. So she asks, what helps did you use moving from stage to stage? Any hints on this to share? And also, how do you know when you are ready to move around the stages?
Oh my gosh.
That's such a great question. Oh my gosh. Okay.
What helped you move from stage to stage?
Well, you know, I mean, I have my husband who's constantly pointing to this chart. Literally, it's in our dining room, and he's like, "All right, honey." So, I do have that you know, blessing, but I think that it's just knowing that, you know, you got to keep moving and things naturally present themselves. And so, you know, if an opportunity presents itself, or two opportunities present themselves, you know, again, stepping back and thinking, all right, what is my response? Where is that going to land me? Is this something I need to just explore? Is this something if I implement it, it's going to help me launch? So, you know, in part, again, it's just kind of keeping this in the back of my head and thinking about how each decision either moves me forward, keeps me stable, or maybe, you know, regresses me. So, I mean, and just, again, like thinking about each of those decisions in the broader context is one of the ways that I try to struggle through that decision-making process.
Yeah, I would add, April, that if you know what practices or people help center you, when I'm in a centered place, it's easier for me to recognize, as Andrea said, what stage I'm in, and then the path becomes clearer for me to move to the next stage. And when I say that, like that's very broad, I get that, and yet it's so true. Like a lot of times, the trap over here, it's easy to get stuck in like we think everything is fine and we don't need to change anything, or the system changes outside of us and we're forced to change. But this is called the rigidity trap on this side. So being aware that that's the side where like I'm holding the fist so tightly that this idea that I'm holding on to or this thing I'm doing in my life, I'm stuck on it. Like I will not budge. It's as simple as like my daughter had expectations for the 2 hours this morning, and then I threw a curveball to her because I asked her to help with her younger brother and sister with breakfast because we were presenting this morning, and she got upset and frustrated because she had a plan for 2 hours. And I'm like, okay, we even do this in our home, like add her in, squeeze your hand together, take a breath, open it up. And that helps me and my family recognize like I'm holding on too tightly to something. And you can get stuck in any one of these stages, and that awareness, I'm thrown off, and then that practice to return to your center. For me, it's meditation, and not just like the actual sitting and meditating, but the lessons I've learned from meditation have given me a language and a framework to interact with life in a more graceful way. It's taught me like you can't always inhale in life, you have to exhale too. So finding that balance of like things are always changing and going with that. I hope that helps. I'd be happy to chat more if you have a more specific question at another time. Feel free to email.
Thank you so much for detailing that out. And just so that people know too, you can send direct messages through Hopin if you want to ask something. Otherwise, yes, following up post-event might be a great way to learn more about this. But Thank you guys so much. This was incredible. Thanks for doing it virtually too. We hope to have you for making this such an engaging way to learn from you today.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody.
Right.
Enjoy the rest of your conference.
Have a great afternoon. Bye.